Yes, I'm a Houston-based children's author of the 13-book Sophie Washington series. And my books are about a little girl named Sophie, who's 11 years old, from the suburbs of Houston, and all of her adventures. So she goes through common tween issues like struggling to fit in, doing her schoolwork, squabbling with her bratty little brother. And all the books have what I call a Texas twist, because since they're set in Houston, they show things that are unique to the lifestyle here. And we have things like, for example, when I go on walks in my neighborhood, I've seen alligators, wild boar, and all kinds of unique wildlife. So it's really unique here in Houston. So the books all highlight some of the diversity in our community and things going on. And then I think you asked me about my author journey. I kind of went off topic.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But I started writing very young. When I was in elementary school, I won a writing competition at my school. We had to write and illustrate our own books. And that's when I my teachers encouraged me. And I said, well, maybe this is something that I will do as an adult. And then I wrote an article that was published in my hometown newspaper. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. And so when I was about 14, and it was published in the paper. My picture was in the paper, and I got my first paycheck as an author at the age of 18. So I was really excited.
What did you write about?
It was about, to date myself, it was about record ratings. There was a column called Your View, and so you could write in about different topics or different things going on. And I remember it was about putting ratings on records and what my views were at the time as a teen. And so once that happened, I said, I want to be a journalist, because at that time, I had never met an author, and writing books wasn't something that I thought I could do for a living. I loved to read. I always read, always had a book in my hand, but I didn't see that as something that I could do to earn, or I didn't even know how to go about it. So I said, well, I'll be a journalist. And so I studied English literature in college, and then worked as a journalist for a while after college. And then when I got married and had my children, I started writing freelance for a family-focused magazine in the Houston area. And I did that for about 10 years. And during the time, I also would read all the time with my children. And my two oldest loved to read, but my youngest, he hated reading. And I couldn't find anything that would get him excited about reading. And so I said, you know what, I might be able to write my own book that might capture his interest and captivate him. So that's what led me to write my books. It had always been a goal of mine to write my own book. And so I said, well, I could write a children's book that would be relatable to kids and be a little more interesting than some of the things I was seeing, and more relatable to him in particular.
Right. And what was it that made you go, because I think I read that originally these were just like bedtime stories for your kids. You had maybe had it in the back of your mind, but what was it that made you switch to say, okay, I'm going to try and publish this?
Well, I had always had kind of a bucket list goal to write my own book. So then I did write the first book in my series, Sophie Washington, Queen of the Bee, and I wrote it and read it as bedtime stories to my kids as I was writing it. Then what happened is that the book originally was illustrated by someone else when it first came out, and I kind of wrote it as a bucket list. I wrote Queen of the Bee and the Snitch. And then what happened is that when I was writing the third book in the series, I got my current illustrator, whose name is Michael Ruengel. And when I saw that, I said, this looks great. And I was, by that time, getting feedback from some other early readers, and they really liked the books and wanted more. So that's what encouraged me to continue, because once I got my illustrator, I recovered the original 2 books, and I went to some kind of local event and got a lot of positive feedback from children and teachers and librarians. And so that's how I continued on, because I initially planned to write maybe 2 or 3 books just as something that I do. And then people started liking the books, and I said, I really believe in these books. They're getting kids excited about reading, and I want to continue with them.
That's wonderful. And one of the things that I think people have really love about the series is that it normalizes diversity. You know, that it's she's an African American girl, but you see her, like you said, and there are things that are very specific about where she lives or with her friends, but there are also a lot of issues that probably any kid can relate to. Why did you decide to write it like that, and what do you think is the effect that it has, or why is that so important to just to normalize diversity in children's books?
Well, when I wrote the books, my main aim was to set them into Houston because I thought it's so interesting here, as I explained
Mm-hmm.
earlier. And I didn't set out to say, oh, they're going to be diverse, but I wanted to show the world that I live in. And Houston is the fourth largest city in the United States and one of the most diverse cities in our country. And for example, when I was writing these books, I could go into a Panera Bread and I would see, one day I went in and there was an Asian family, a Muslim family, Indian, people who looked like they were from Africa, Nigerian, African Americans, whites, blacks. So there's all these people who live in the area that I'm in, and those are the makeup of the schools. If you go to schools around in this area, they're Hispanic as well. It's very diverse. So I wanted to show that in the books,
Mm-hmm.
and then people really embrace them because of the diversity. But
Right.
the things in my book are shown in my community, and so as a byproduct, it just also showed different races and cultures getting together in harmony. And
Mm-hmm.
my books also show diversity in other conditions the kids may have. Like one child in the book has dyslexia, one
Mm-hmm.
has diabetes. So they show different things that people experience, and they've been relatable to readers as a byproduct. I've get letters from one little girl that had dyslexia wrote,
Mm-hmm.
and she was so happy to see this reflected in a book.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask is, do you think that that's why the books are so relatable? And also you talked about how you initially started it to get your son interested in reading and that it's had this effect for other kids. And do you think it is because, you know, they feel like they can relate to the characters, they see themselves in the books?
Yes, there's a psychologist, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, who says that books should be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I
Mm-hmm.
really ascribe to that with my writing and with what I'm presenting to the readers, because, and what that means is that when you have a mirror, you're reflected back to yourself. So the reader sees themselves in the book. With the windows, it's showing other cultures, other peoples, and then sliding glass doors is allowing people to travel between different worlds. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is so important for children and for our world and our nation, because learning about different people teaches empathy, understanding, and I believe a lot of the problems that we have in our nation could be solved if we start with the kids and get them learning about other people and just all understanding each other.
Right.
That's so important to me as an author, and that's just embracing diversity and understanding between different peoples is a
Mm-hmm.
mission of mine.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you said that you were a big reader as a child. And I know for me growing up, there really weren't that many diverse children's books. And the ones that were not necessarily written by people of color. A lot of times they're white people, you know, and so I mean, what effect, I mean, you kind of touched on this already. Like, what effect does that have on kids growing up when
It,
when they can't see themselves?
I see that even impacting myself because, well, first of all, when I forgot to mention with my son who didn't like to read, again, I liked Little House on the Prairie and different
Right.
books, and he totally did not relate to any of these books. And it made him not want to read. And then when he would find books that he could relate to, that got him reading. And I've gotten countless letters from parents saying that my series has encouraged their reluctant readers to read. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a key that they're seeing themselves in the books. And even personally, I noticed there was a book called Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park,
Mm-hmm.
which talks about the time of Little House on the Prairie, because I used to love those books.
Right.
It's the main character is Asian, and
Mm-hmm.
I realized it internalized a lot of these prejudices about Native Americans and things growing up from what I saw, with Westerns and all these different things. And it has a huge impact when I look back how we thought of Native Americans or called them Indians, and in the books, how they portrayed different peoples.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have this diversity and to show people in or the way that they truly are, and to have own voices, authors writing as well, because we can all tell different stories as an author and as a creator. I can write about any ethnicity, but it's important to support own voices, writers, because they give that authenticity and tell their true stories.
Right. And like you said, a lot of times when you're a kid, you just kind of drink in these images without necessarily really critically analyzing them. Because I think I did the same. I loved the Little House books when I was a kid. The same thing. And we don't even necessarily, I didn't actually even remember a lot of the stuff in the book until it was pointed out as an adult. And then you think,
Right.
what effect did that have on me without me even knowing? Versus kids reading your books, and they're drinking in all these images that maybe not even realizing the effect it's having, and yet they're really positive, like you said, very authentic experiences and images.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, because even in some of those books, they had minstrel shows and other things, and I
Right.
them and I didn't even think anything of it when I was reading them. So I said,
Mm-hmm.
how did that impact me, taking this in? So it's just so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I'm so grateful that we have books like yours that are available now. And um, just to go back to when you were talking about when you first started publishing, and how that I know I've heard you mention that you were really nervous when you first started publishing. I read that in one of your interviews. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors and how to get started, and if they're trying to decide how to go about it?
I would advise them to read widely, as far as, well, on the internet, there's so much information about self-publishing, so many resources to get information. I would recommend, there's a site called Reedsy, Reedsy, that has many articles about publishing. And they also have vetted list of professionals, editors, graphic designers, formatters, illustrators that you can use to help you get a quality product. And there's also an organization called the Alliance for Independent Authors that does watchdog list of all kind of resources available to indies, so that you can avoid mistakes. Or because myself, for example, when I started, I used a hybrid publisher, and they actually were keeping my royalties, and there's now a suit against them. So, and then I learned how to do everything myself. And I used them when I did my first book, so I wasn't really marketing it or doing anything. But once I started marketing it, I said, they're keeping my money. What is going on here? I read all kinds of articles online. I used Reedsy. There's another person named Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn, who is a guru, and I followed her tips step by step on book marketing, publishing. She has a lot of great information on her Creative Pen website that can
Mm-hmm.
steer you in the right direction if you
Yeah.
want to do.
Well, I was just going to mention about the marketing, because if people haven't checked out your Instagram, I mean, you have a lot of really fun videos and you're always posting. And I think something that I've heard from a lot of authors is they didn't realize how much of being an author was having to do social media and marketing. Is that something that surprised you?
Well, I knew that I had to do marketing, and I actually do have an MBA degree and a background with a marketing concentration. So I've had sales and marketing experience in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But so I did know that if I wanted to get my book out there, I had to promote it. But I wasn't on social media when I first came out with my books, or it
Mm-hmm.
was 2018 when I started marketing them. And so I had to learn about that. And that's a big thing. And I do attribute that to my success as an author with sales, because I was posting and putting things online. So that helped me find my ideal readers,
Right.
get them sold around the country and even around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that is, that's hard. It's like you feel like you had this huge accomplishment when you wrote that book, But then the work begins, because then you've got to, if you want to sell it to more than just your family and friends, you've got a lot of work to do with that as well. That's true.
And I should mention, I think I saw that you recently did an interview about specifically about writing middle grade books. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Mm-hmm.
It was a podcast called Author Your Dreams. I actually did two podcast interviews on writing middle grade books, and those can be found on my Instagram page at Tonya Ellis Books. Links to those if you want to check those out.
That's great, because I mean, it seems like so many of the people that we interview do picture books, and middle grade is very different. Did you always know that that's kind of the age range that you wanted to go for?
Well, I just started out with middle grade. I didn't know much about writing picture books because I love to read middle grade. And so reading middle grade books with my children when I decided to write the Sophie Washington series. And so for me, it was natural just to go right into the middle grade. But I have been also writing picture books as well. The past year, I just started writing picture books, and that's a totally different animal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it was harder to write picture books than middle grade, even though they're longer, because they're different. They're kind of like poetry, and they're different than middle grade.
I didn't know you were doing picture books. Can you give us a preview of what you're working on?
Well, I can't say too much. I'm working now. I also have a literary agent, so I'm working with her, and so look for news in the coming months.
Exciting. That's good. Well, then in that case, why don't we wrap up? Why don't you tell us about your latest installment of the Sophie Washington series? I know it just came out, I think, Treasure Beach.
Yes, so Treasure is the 13th book in the series, and it is an adventure story that has Sophie, her best friend Chloe, her little brother Cole, visiting her grandma in Corpus Christi. And they find a message in a bottle that leads them on an exciting scavenger hunt or treasure hunt adventure. So this one has a lot of fun. Granny Washington is in some earlier books, and in it they talk about them visiting her every summer. So I thought it would be fun to have them on the beach and to show because here in Texas we have Galveston Beach is about 40 minutes from my home. I go there, especially during the pandemic. I used to just drive there just to get away.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of beautiful beaches here, and I found that they have endangered sea turtles in Island and in Corpus Christi area. So I wanted to write about that. So it talks also about ecology and endangered animals in the book as well.
Oh, I can't wait. I haven't had a chance to get a copy yet, so I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, you got to get your copy. It's out and ready for all the readers. So, and every favorite one, every time I write one, but that was a lot.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, if you haven't had a chance to check out the series, you need to do that. Look at our Instagram page. It's so much fun. And make sure to get your copy of Treasure Beach, which is out now. Thank you.